We'll call the council and committee meeting to order. First item, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item is the minutes of this committee's meeting of Monday, November 5th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item.
Next item is our first delegation. I'd like to invite Mr. Dave Gormley from the Beedie Development Group to come forward. He's here to speak on the Fraser Mills project. There's a relation to item 4 on the agenda.
Come forward, sir. You'd like to get your name and address for the record first.
My name's Dave Gormley at 3030 Gilmore Diversion, Burnaby.
Go ahead. You try and keep it down to 5 minutes if you can.
I will try.
Thank you very much.
I've got Gregory Henriquez, our architect. He's also here should there be any questions after we proceed here. I'd like to thank Council for the opportunity to give this presentation. We're working through the various changes and agreements that were proposed by Henriquez in the spring, and we've actually made a development permit pre-application on our first phase at Fraser Mills. So that's the waterfront buildings, the plaza, the waterfront, the pier, and that component. But over the last couple of years, we've been monitoring the residential market conditions, and we're discovering the average unit size is decreasing quite significantly over the last 5 to 7 years. And most of it's been generated because of the high cost of construction, high cost of development. And to make the various projects affordable, the unit sizes of each unit they're getting smaller as we proceed through here. So one of the things we're requesting Council is there's currently a 3,700 unit residential cap for Fraser Mills. We would like to request Council consider an increase in that 3,700. We're not asking for any additional square foot density or additional height. The concept that you saw in 2008 when it was originally approved, and also the concept that Henriquez presented to Council in the spring, that's the form and character of what we're proposing. That wouldn't change. The additional units would actually fit inside those forms, different buildings that you saw in that sort of scenario of it. With the smaller units, the way it's happening right now, there's a potential chance that there's about 750 to 850,000 square feet of building, which was approved in 2008, cannot be built because of the 3,700 unit cap. And it's what it is when we started this suburban, we were looking at more townhouses. We had parkades above grade, and we're going to wrap it around with townhomes. Also, suburban residential towers, the square footage used to be larger than it did, say, in Vancouver in various areas. But what's happening in Vancouver is now happening in Coquitlam Centre, it's happening in Metrotown, it's happening in Surrey Centre. The construction costs and the development costs are forcing the units down from 1,100 down to about 900 average, and that's gross, so you discount out the hallways, things of that nature. We got a lot of significant amenities that were built into the Fraser Mills project, which includes the pier, the plaza, waterfront park, $5 million towards affordable housing, another 185 affordable housing units built on the site, $1 million towards the pedestrian between United Boulevard, pedestrian realm between United Boulevard and Brunette, which has already actually been paid. Another $5 million DCC payments towards the King Edward. We paid that, or be paying that in advance on this. So there's a number, another $500,000 for the Mackin Park upgrades and $250,000 for lacrosse box. So there's a lot of amenities, but part of that was, assuming that we could build out most of the square footage that's being proposed. So what we're asking for would be increasing the number of units probably to about 4,700 units from 3,700. At the end of the day, it will likely be somewhere in the middle. But our preference is not to have to come back to council and ask again. It will be as long as we're trying to get the square footage we can get out of it. Population-wise, as the units get smaller, the actual number of people living in those units get less. So as a suburban, originally we figured there's going to be probably 2.0 to 2.1 people per person living in each of the units on average. With the smaller units, it's probably going to be closer to 1.8 units. If you go down to the west end of Vancouver, it's actually at 1.5. Downtown Vancouver is probably around 1.6, 1.7. So as the units get smaller, the number of people, average number of people living in them also. So there would be a slight decrease in the number of people in the residence, but with if you had a full 1,000 units, additional units built, we're probably going to end up with probably about an extra 1,000 people.
How much more time do you need?
About 2 minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
We've taken a look at a number of the various issues, parking, recreational requirements down there, site services, traffic. We've had our consultants review all of that information. They've submitted information to city staff on that. We're not anticipating any major issues by adding the additional 1,000 units as it relates to that. We're committed to developing a first-class waterfront development, and we are requesting council consider an increase in the unit count to 4,700 units as a maximum, so that basically we can realize the density and pay for the amenities and the contributions. Thank you.
Councilor Reid?
I have quite a few questions to ask about this development. I can either do it now or at item 4. What would you prefer?
Go ahead.
Item 4? I'll wait then if I can speak at item 4. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gormley. Next item.
Thank you. The next item is our second delegation. I'd like to invite Adrian Johnson, who's the owner of 2961 Combe Lake Avenue, to come forward. He's here to speak to concerns related to the pump station adjacent to his property. We have circulated some information to each of you in advance.
Come forward, sir. You'd like your name and address for the record?
Adrian Johnson, 2961 Combe Lake Avenue, Coquitlam.
And try and keep your comments down to 5 minutes if you can.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to let me express myself. My name is Adrian Johnson. I am a naval architect by trade, but I work as a building operator manager in Vancouver. In 2005, I bought a small house located at 2961 Combe Lake Avenue in Coquitlam, thinking that this would be a great place to retire. After a few years, I realized I could not afford this house and I had to help my daughters with university costs. So I decided to sell the property. I contacted the realtor and he told me the house could sell with $480,000. Unfortunately, soon after this, the city of Coquitlam started a big project right next to our house. A new water or sewage pump was being installed. This started what continued to be a nightmare for me and my wife. First, the city cut down a line of trees that were placed between my property and the city's property. There was also an alley between our property and the city property, and this was destroyed as well. How can I describe what it's like right now? Rain, mud, huge puddles, plus a lot of noisy, constant activity and workers running around. Under these conditions, the realtor said he cannot sell the place until there is an end to all the activity that makes it look like a disaster zone. We contacted other realtors who also said the same thing. We decided to lower the price and we got down to $390,000, but even at this cost we cannot sell. In fact, it's been almost 4 years and the work going on around our house seems never ending. The city continue to work. I think there are now 2 pumps going next to our place. The summer of 2011 was a nightmare. There were flag people guiding us out of our driveway because the whole entrance to our house was constantly blocked. I work in 12-hour shift for 4 days, and so I need to rest in the 3 days that I am home. But there is ongoing noisy next to our house. It's like a construction site. Plus there is a terrible smell coming because of the pumps. It's a stench, and every realtor asks about the stench when they come to see the house. Now I am close to bankruptcy, as I could not sell the house and my wife had some eye surgery and cannot work temporarily. But is this fair? 40 years ago, when my house was built, the city engineers also included a line of trees and an alley between my property and the city's property. Those trees were important to prevent the noisy and help with the horrible smell. And also, the alley was there in case someone wanted to build a duplex. They could access the house through the alley. So I am here to ask for compensation for my struggle for the past 4 years and to propose some solutions. First solution, my property is evaluated at $414. It is likely that the city of Coquitlam will need more space to develop water pumps or other such things. If the city wishes to buy my property for the price I pay taxes on, I am willing to sell my lot. Maybe the city can make some green space between its pumps and the other neighbors, so everyone around can enjoy some peace and quiet when the city needs to work in the area. And the second solution, if the city cannot buy the property, then I need to be compensated for the loss of money I incurred for the past 4 years when I could not sell my property because the city was constantly doing work in front of and next to my house. I need to sell this place because I cannot take the noise and the smell anymore. To increase my chances of selling, I need to have 66 feet wide land because some developers told me this way the property could be divided and the duplex can be built. Right now, I have 60 feet wide land, so I hope the city can give me 6 feet worth of land so I can finally sell this place. In the place that used to be the alley, now there is nothing, just some wild grass and in which coyotes keep hiding and where people are throwing garbage, so it looks awful anyway. At least if that was someone's property, they would take care of and it make it look nice. I hope that you will consider my complaint and will solve this in a way that is fair for everyone.
Mr. Johnson, how much more time do you need?
I finished. Thank you so much.
You're through?
He's
Yeah.
through.
Okay. Council Amundsen.
Just through to staff, he said there's been construction, and I don't know if we've had 4 years construction. So is this our project? Is it a Metro Vancouver project? And has there always been pumping stations on this property in this location?
Yeah, through the chair, there are 2 pumping stations adjacent to the delegates' lot. One is an historic sanitary sewer pumping station that was built in 1977. And about 2 or 3 years ago, the city built another pumping station on its lot known as the Green Street Drainage Pumping Station. So that just pumps stormwater. It's not a sanitary pumping station. Certainly over recently, you might recall that GVRD, Metro Vancouver, had a significant sewer lining project going on in the Lougheed Highway corridor and in that area. And during that construction period, it certainly was necessary for the project to use our Green Street sanitary pumping station from time to time to open it up for access to help facilitate the Metro project. So I would say that was probably episodic, but other than that, it's regularly, normally functioning sanitary pumping station.
So, Mr. Suzak, you're talking about the upgrade of that, but that hasn't been going on there hasn't been an active construction site for 4 years straight?
No, not at all. There was an active construction site there about 2 or 3 years ago for the city's drainage pumping station. But only recently, over the summertime, was there maybe some activity at that site in order to facilitate Metro's project.
Okay, thank you.
All through?
Yep.
Okay, Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Johnson. I was having a hard time visualizing where this was, and then I remembered that there's a tiny little part of Como Lake that's not the Como Lake Avenue that everybody else knows. It's down the lower part, just off of Lougheed near Port Coquitlam. And so I found that it's, as a homeowner myself, I can certainly understand your concerns. Have you specifically asked these questions about purchase of property, purchase of extra land, compensation? Have you asked these questions of any of the officials at City Hall, or is this the first time that you're raising these sorts of questions?
No, sir. This is the 7th time.
7th time?
Yeah. I've been every office here and upstairs.
And tell me what okay, I know you've been raising concerns about the noise and the traffic and everything, but on the specific, when you're getting into compensation, are those the questions you've been asking as well?
No.
You haven't asked the compensation questions?
I asked the compensation 2-3 weeks ago when Mr. Mike, the city engineer, chief engineer, was there to see what we can do.
And what was the answer you received then?
He said we're going to give to the offices who's making this subdividing the city property so they can give me some compensation on my side.
And do we know, Mr. Mike, who that might be?
Go ahead, Mr. Suzuki.
Through the chair, we have 2 representatives of the Public Works Division. One is Jamie Umpleby, the Director of Public Works, and the other is Mike Ivany. And Mike Ivany is the manager of all the underground utility infrastructure. So I'm assuming that the conversations were with Mr. Ivany, and I'd invite these 2 gentlemen down just in case they have any additional information that council or committee wants to share.
Go ahead.
Now, I don't know if these sorts of discussions can take place in public or not. We're talking about land issues now, so perhaps, and that's should be in camera.
We can deal with it in camera this afternoon.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, so that's all my questions then. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Reamer.
My question's been answered.
Okay. Councillor Reid.
Yes, I thank you for coming forward with this and for the pictures, but these are things that I think City Council needs to know a lot more technical things about, and I think this discussion should be moved to in camera on the first available agenda spot. So I would so move.
Second. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Certainly, we'll deal with it probably this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Next item.
Next item, item 4, pertains to further proposed amendments to the Waterfront Village Centre. This is Fraser Mills Neighbourhood Plan, and it speaks specifically to a residential unit density increase. The staff recommendation is to receive the report for information.
Camera first.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I guess I can ask Mr. Gormley from here, but the motion, the recommendation is to receive the report, and I think that's just fine. The 1,000 units I'm having a bit of difficulty with, but I will move on. This has been a favorite project of mine from the get-go. This was a project that came to us virtually out of nowhere and became something that was really special. It's our waterfront development. This is it. Other than Como Lake, this is it. This is our waterfront development. We've got Lafarge Lake, Como Lake, and we've got the river, and this is where all these special places are going to be. And all the densities are done, and a few months ago when they came back in and had redone all the outsides, the facades, and changed things around, it's wonderful, and I'm still in love with the development. I'm having difficulty because this is not like Metrotown. This is not like City Centre, Vancouver, and this is not like Coquitlam Centre. This, in the city centres, I expect that the units can be smaller. But when we come to what I call a premier or primo, the wow factor, the one development in my city that is going to offer waterfront views and waterfront walks and a beautiful little village and all those things, I know when I downsized, even getting into 1,200 square feet was difficult. And I really want to see some of these units, maybe not townhouses, I'm not in love with that, but I am in love with some apartments that are like Station Hill in Burnaby, a primo development, which are 1,000, 1,200 square feet and up. And there's very few penthouses, and I know they sell for 800,000 up. But we have a lot of folks in Coquitlam who are waiting for this waterfront development to downsize, but to downsize into 1,000 or 1,200 square foot developments. And there are a lot of folks that would be doing that. And I see some of my colleagues all nodding their heads, so you may get all of us living there at any given moment. But it's just such a special place, and to me, you are the builder of my first iconic landmark on Austin, and it's going to be a superb building. But this is the development in Coquitlam that I love. It's my waterfront. I say mine because I just love it. It is the place that is so special. When I look around, and I have over the weekend, I was out and very busy, and I look at New Westminster Quay, and although there are units that are 800 and 900, there's most of the units down there, although built a long time ago, I will admit, are 1,000 and up. And that's what people are looking for now. And I go to Station Hill in Burnaby, their south slope with the beautiful views, 1,000 square feet and up. There's our town center. Yeah, it's got a lot of smaller units, but my beautiful waterfront village, that to me is going to have to be ready to take a lot of us down there. The townhouses I'm not having a problem with whatsoever, whether they stay or they go. The fact that the look of the place is going to be the same, I think, is good. I've never seen 1.8 of a person. 0.8 would have to be Councillor Robinson because she's only this tall anyhow. But I really think that we have to, and I know you do this because of densities and all that, but I mean, let's be logical. Most of them are probably going to be occupied by a couple. Staff in their report did one thing that I don't see very often, and it never really tells me a lot other than that staff do want to review things. And when I look on page 5, it's very telling to me, and it says, point form, Beedie's architects have concluded, Beedie's transportation consultants have concluded, Beedie's engineering consultants have concluded, Beedie's emergency services consultants. So that means that you have done all the due diligence and you have done it well, as I'm sure that you do everything. But to me, we have to have another public consultation. But before I go out to my public, I want to make sure that we've done our due diligence on all of these points put forward on page 5. I want to know that all the market trends that you're dealing with, although I don't doubt them, but I want to know from my perspective in what I call a premier development in my city, I want to know that we have looked at all of these things. And I'm hoping that we don't have to go 1,000 more units. I hope, as you said yourself, that we can go somewhere in between. But I think we need to take some time, and I guess our staff will be doing this and come forward before we have to make any recommendation on this. And I just want you to know that I'm still in love with this development, absolutely. But I do not want to see us make the mistake of going so small that all of us with beautiful gray hair have to move somewhere else in order to find myself some kind of a luxury, or maybe not luxury, but upscale development to move to in another city. And I thank you, and I look forward to your report after the new year.
Okay, Councillor Emerson.
Well, thank you, Councillor Reid. Similar thoughts on the shrinking of the units. I'd like to see a larger range of some larger units, 1,000 up. I think we're seeing two different things happening. We are having people who are downsizing out of houses coming into places looking for larger units. You take Liberty Homes that was built recently, and they specifically designed their units for people downsizing into those. And those are 1,000, 1,500 in a range, and they're very popular, built very well. And they have 2 parking stalls per unit, which is another good thing I'd like to see. I do think there's going to be a need for smaller units, but I think there needs to be a better range and mix of it. You're out in Coquitlam here. It's a different market than Burnaby and Vancouver, and I understand the need for maybe a readjustment of some of the numbers, but I also look at our demographics changing and the new people that are coming in. A lot more people coming from other places are having families within smaller apartment styles units. And I think, where I live up in the Northeast, we were expecting less young people and less families and some of the costs than what we have up there right now. And I think we're going to see that down in Fraser Mills. The cost of a unit, even for an apartment, is quite expensive. So you're going to see more than 1.8, more than 2 people in some of these units living in them. So that's a concern of mine. I'm glad that our staff is going to be looking through and reviewing that aspect of it. The other concern to me is about 2 parts. Is there going to be enough parking on the site with the increase down there? I also look at Fraser Mills, and I can't remember the exact of your new plan, which I really like. You came through council, I think, the architect, the Reed Stein, going in ground, getting rid of the platforms, all great stuff. But it's going to be a place where people want to go. And I hopefully that there's enough destination parking built in to take for all people that want to drive down there, walk along the waterfront, go to restaurants down there, be down there, because they're not all going to take transit. So I think that's another key component that I'd like to see in the transportation plan, the parking plan, destination area parking for people coming down there, because I really think in the long term when it starts to build out, and hopefully that starts soon, the building of it, that when it gets finished, it's going to be quite the spectacular waterfront place for people to be, and it's going to be a draw for a lot of people wanting to go down there. So I think destination parking is something that I really want to see looked at by yourselves and by our city staff. And I'm in agreement with what the staff is recommending to look at. I'm looking forward to some more reports from staff back on this. But I just have concerns about the size of the units, and 1,000 more people, as long as the transportation fund, the parking can work out, I don't have a big issue with that. I think, with SkyTrain and that transit ability close by, that isn't a big issue, but I do think the unit size, I think you may be missing the market a little bit on that one. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I think that Councillor Reid and Councillor Osmondson, I think, addressed some of the issues that I have some concern with as well. And when this project was first pitched to us, it was based on the idea that it would be a sort of mixed use that would have a diverse community. And when we start to shrink these sizes and you lose the diversity, it's really hard to be mom, dad, 2 kids in 600 square feet. So while I recognize the price point, I completely sort of appreciate the challenges that come with that. But it then challenges the idea of diversity, because you wind up with all the same kinds of families. So it's going to be singles and couples, and that's it. And so how do we do this balance in creating a neighborhood? The other thing is, the other part that we certainly told the community when we looked at this project was that this would be a place for people to downsize. And just like others have heard, I have parents who are downsizing and in-laws, and it's impossible for them to go from a 4,000 square foot house to a 700 square foot apartment. It's killing them. And there is nothing anywhere for them to go. So, and I'm sure you guys do your market analysis, but I actually do think there is a pocket that is being missed here. And so I'd like to hear from staff about sort of their analysis. I too am worried about the traffic. We struggle with TransLink and their ability to make service happen in the way that it needs to happen in a timely fashion. And given the challenges that we have hooking in with that Bailey Bridge and hooking into New West, I actually do worry a lot about having an extra. I do think it'll bring more people. I can't figure out how you do 1,000 units but not have the same number of people, because if they were larger units, typically you would have families, and children don't drive cars. So if you have more units, you're going to have more. I think you're just going to have more vehicles. Unless someone wants to show me the math, my intuitive sense says that there's going to be more vehicles, and so I just get a little bit anxious. So. I think more study is needed. I'd like to hear from our staff in terms of their analysis coming back, and I'm prepared to hear what the public has to say about this change. Thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I too share some of the same concerns. There is absolutely a niche market out there for 1,000 square foot, 1,200 square feet units. Many people who are on the verge of retiring, as Councillor Robinson has said, will leave 4,000 and 5,000 square foot homes, and they can't go down to 600 or 700 square feet. I speak to people every day that are telling us that we need more large apartments, and so I'd really love to see a study, a market study on this, because I do think that there is the demand for that. I just have one question, and I guess if there's 1,000 additional units within the buildings that are already there, those additional units are going to be phased in during the various phases of the project, so there'll be an even distribution there. We're not going to get 1,000 new apartments all at once in phase one. Is that correct? You're nodding your head. Thank you. I do have concerns about fire service. I do want to hear back from our staff and from our fire chief, and I'd really love to sit down with our staff at some point early January and talk about some of these concerns that have been expressed. I do have spent a fair bit of time down on the New Westminster Quay, and the destination parking is absolutely crucial to this particular project, as it is at the New Westminster Quay, because it will be a destination stop for people. So that's about all I have to say, and I look forward to receiving some additional input from our staff on this. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll try not to repeat a whole lot of stuff that everybody said already. Your tolerance for size has something to do with your age, and I'm older than Councillor Robinson. Probably a little bit closer to her parents' age. But I have to tell you that my wife has been anxiously looking forward to Fraser Mills, and said to me the other day, "It's really going to be great, but I hope they're not going to be small like the Austin." So I'm not sure if I'm going home tonight. But there's one point that I'd like you to try and address for us as we get closer to having to make an actual decision, other than saying thank you for the information. You're talking here about 1,000 more units, and I was very relieved to hear Dave say, but that's probably not what we need. Probably closer to half. Did you say about half that? When I come down to making a decision, I'm going to want the number to be a lot more precise. If we were dealing with it today, I'd have the feeling that I was writing a blank check, and I'm not sure what I'm going to get come the end of the day. And the more that you push it up, the further away we get from what we thought we were having. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that I'm looking forward to this development because it's going to be different from what we're doing. And to me, this is Coquitlam's waterfront. We're building an amenity for the whole community here, and I think it's going to be an incredible amenity when it's built. I think it's going to be a vibrant part of our city, and it is going to be a destination where the rest of Coquitlam will come to. And we know that to get around Coquitlam, you need cars, and we are going to need destination parking down there, and the people who live there are going to need cars. It's not on the SkyTrain line, so we are going to need parking. I am concerned that as we go to smaller units, we're more likely to have individual owners with cars. Unlike the larger units, that there may be two people with one car. I think that as we build more units, we're going to have more cars. And I think that's just a fact of living in Coquitlam. I think that I want to see alternatives. I agree that maybe we can, it's about having choices, it's about having a mix of housing. So, it may make sense to make a few of them smaller. But at the same time, we're building a community and is going to have, I think, the feel of something like Falls Creek. But we're building an affordable option. I don't think we have to follow the same Vancouver model. I don't think that we have to go small. I think that we do have some economies of construction things out here in the outlying areas, and I think that gives us an opportunity to do something different. And I think that there will be a demand for larger units. People who are living in Coquitlam now are most of the people that are downsizing. They're coming from houses. Unlike people who are maybe in Vancouver moving between apartments to apartments, I think a lot of the people looking to live here will be people coming from 2,400 square foot homes. And I think to them, downsizing is going in half, which is the 1,000 to 1,200 range. So I think that we need to provide those options for the people who currently live in this city, that want to downsize, who want to live in a place like Fraser Mills, but they may not want to go down to the smaller units. And I think that we have some opportunities here in Coquitlam, and I'd like to see a little more studying done on this, because I believe that there would be a demand for those units, but at the same time recognizing the trend to some of the smaller units. And I think it's about choices. And like Councillor Nicholson, I'd like to know a little bit more what the numbers are. If we're saying 200 or 300 more, that's a whole lot different than 1,000 more. So I'd like to sort of get a better idea on that. And also, I like the concept of the wraparound, where we're doing more, where we're putting the units around the parking. And I'd want to make sure that as we go to smaller units, we have enough units, because as we go smaller with the units, we're going up with the parking. And I think that that's going to present some challenges to keep the look of the units. So I want to see more attention paid to that, and I'd like a little more information on it before we go too much further down this road. Thank you.
Altering. Councillor O'Neill, rather.
Thank you. It's my understanding, by the way, that it used to be a wraparound concept, and now the parking is going underground. Yeah. Now, a couple of people mentioned the housing choices, and I think that's a really important thing to talk about here, because that's something that's been talked about in the year now that Councillor Hodge had been on council. We've probably heard housing choices 1,000 times. And quite often we think about it, when we hear it, it's in relation to getting more density and getting more smaller homes on existing lots and things like that. But it really does mean, and it should mean, choices. And that's something that I would encourage the proponents to really keep in mind. I do know that looking at the Austin, it's the other big project that this group is involved in. There are some larger units there, 1,500 square feet, 1,356, 1,335, 1,342, 1,303, 1,298 square feet, penthouses and sub-penthouses and things like that. The majority seem to be around 700 feet, and there's some down to 500 square feet. I mean, that's a pretty good options of choice there. You've got to pay for that extra size, though. But really, when we're looking at Fraser Mills, with a development of this magnitude, it really does make sense, I think, to see a good variety of choices. We can't be inflexible. We have to respond to the market, and I do believe that because of the high prices in the whole Lower Mainland, well, the whole Greater Vancouver anyway, that there's definitely an affordability issue, and if you're built, you can't sell that many 1,500 square foot units of any sort. That's a fairly limited market. It might be available for people with big homes downsizing. How big is that market? So I would just encourage the proponents to make sure they've got it right, and that we can be comfortable with it. But truly, in a development this size and of this importance at Fraser Mills, you would expect some real choice, and I think that's what we're all looking for. We don't want to dictate. I don't think we can dictate exactly what's going to be in there. The market should be telling us to a large degree, but we can also guide and shape, and I think that's our responsibility and role. So insofar as the Austin has some real choice, let's make sure we've got some real choice at Fraser Mills as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that the council members have given a good message to the planning department and to Mr. Gormley. I think that this takes a lot more work, and I'd hope that the council members have some time with the planning department, maybe one afternoon, to be able to sit down and talk this over for a couple hours. It's not going to be able to resolve it in 15 or 20 minutes. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the feedback. It's good questions, good comments. I've been making notes, and I'm sure the proponent has as well. We'll take that away. So if I could, if I can paraphrase, before we go out to reinitiate the Section 879 community consultation, let us take this away, and we'll do some analysis, and they'll bring that back to council so you can see all that information, and we can have a discussion at that time. And then, depending on council's thoughts at that time, we can then carry on through the public consultation process. So it'll be a couple months, given that we got Christmas coming up here, but we'll, as soon as we can, early in the new year, we'd come back with a report. We'll do some more analysis, we'll do some checking around, and we'll try to respond on those questions. We'll give you our assessment and lay that out for council, have further discussion at that time, and then hopefully we can move forward with the renewed 879 consultation. So if that's okay, that's the direction I'm taking from this discussion this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Can we have a motion to receive?
So moved. Second.
Regularly moved and second. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Next item.
Next item, item 5, is proposed policies and design guidelines for sloping sites in Partington Creek. We have introductory comments by the General Manager of Planning and Development. The report is for information.
Okay, it's before you.
Just wait.
Councilor
No, after his comments, after Mr. McIntyre's comments.
Okay. Councilor Emmer?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, there's some introductory comments from the General Manager.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. What I just wanted to mention to Council is this item number 5, and that's dealing with the sloping site, proposed sloping site design guidelines. And the next item, item number 6, the proposed bear management policies. We're bringing these forward as proposed draft policies in those areas, and for Council's consideration this afternoon's discussion. May have some questions for us. We try to answer those at this time if we could. You may have some direction for us to take away, and our hopes are that we're tracking in the right direction, and that we can take that away today and build that into the draft Partington Creek Neighbourhood Plan. We're working away on that. We're still trying to get that to Council before the end of the new year. And so what we want to do is sort of check in and touch base with you today on these aspects here, and depending on the feedback we receive, we would take that and build that into the draft Partington Creek Neighbourhood Plan. So that's kind of where we're at in the process, and so I leave it to you for your questions and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Overall, a very good report. Thank you for bringing it forward. I do have a couple of comments into the report. What the report didn't talk about the drainage, and I really think with the rainfall we're getting that we need to increase the drainage ability, the piping that's going to go in the ground to take away the water. If we can build a lot of these things, but we don't properly move the water, and we're seeing some very intense rainfalls lately that we, especially in Partington Creek, I think we need a larger piping and drainage system to handle from around the buildings along beside the retaining walls in that area. So that's my one comment. What I like about here is we had some, which I talked to Mr. McIntyre about, stripping away an area, platforming, and sticking more to the natural topography, getting away from allowing that to happen. I saw that in the report. Thank you. I also like the fact of the concept of what we did up on in the report about Liberty Homes, building into the slope, using the building as a stabilizing force on the slope. So that's in the report. Really glad to see that direction, that type of moving forward on it. The information for you from the report on potential broader applications in this policy for the rest of the city, yes, it should be expanded out for the rest of the city. I think we're all in a mountainous area. We can develop in these areas, but we have to do it in a safe and sustainable long-term way. But this is a great step in the right direction for Partington Creek, which is a fairly steep area in some areas, not so bad in some areas, but for the larger areas. And I think going through the rest of our area, it would be well thought of. And the Bear, it's a great part of it. So good report all around. There's some of my comments. Thank you.
Councilor Rimmer.
Thank you. I, too, am very pleased to see the report. I'm wondering if you could just clarify what the timeline is, because I thought I heard you say at the end of the new year.
Gladly, Mr. Chair. No, end of this year.
Okay, thank you.
No, I'm not trying to buy another 12 months.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I have is, you've said in several different places within the report that it will result in increased staff time. And so, we're always trying to streamline our processes, et cetera. What is the impact of this on that?
Mr. Chairman, I can offer my comments and then perhaps turn it over to Carl Johansson, the manager of community planning, who's worked more closely on this initiative. I think what we're trying to do is just to be upfront and honest that with additional guidelines that have to be looked at, both in the subdivision approval process and rezoning, so that would be Raul and his team through
right.
rezoning and subdivision, so it's just one more aspect they have to look at. And as well then at the development permit stage for multifamily. So I think that's, I don't know, Carl, is there anything else you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I don't think that would be a common issue. I think in maybe certain exceptions where there's challenging sites, there may be a little bit more staff time to work with the developer to achieve the outcomes here, but we don't see it as being a regular occurrence.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Robinson.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the diagrams. You have no idea how helpful they were. I don't know if this is freehand or cut and paste, but they're very helpful because the words sometimes don't quite help. But having a picture is fabulous. So a couple things. One of the proposed policies is to minimize cut and fill excavations. And I'm trying to think of something that's a little stronger than minimize, because different people have different ideas. It's kind of like our wedding. When I said, I want a small wedding, and my husband said, sure. But my idea of small and his idea of small were two very different things. And so when we talk about minimize cut and fill excavations, a developer may have one idea of what that means, and we have another. And I'm wondering if, and I don't have the language, but I'm wondering if we ought to be really clear what we mean. That is a last resort, that you have to go to all these other, you have to look at all these other models. Because if that's what it is, I think we need to be upfront rather than minimize, which is like my small wedding.
And Mr. Chair, sounds like my wedding too. Had to pick up the tab though. I guess that's always the challenge when you're crafting guidelines, development permit guidelines. It's not the black and white prescription that you have in the zoning bylaw. But let us take that away. We'll give that some more thought as to if that can be framed a little more firmly, I guess.
So there has to be that they have to demonstrate that they have tried other methods and that they wouldn't work. I'm just because what other people think was a small wedding wasn't really such a small wedding. The other thought I had, and this is again, it just comes to this idea that I think we have a bit of an illusion that we're creating a walkable community. When I was reading through this report and looking at some of the slopes, it's like, really? How walkable is this community going to be? So I still sort of cringe when I look at some of those slopes. And I think that's going to be a huge challenge, and particularly around pedestrian connections. As we talk about stairs and or ramps, and stairs are a huge barrier just around mobility, but also people have strollers. These are families. And so I'm wondering if we can, I don't know if there's any guidelines about that we can help the developers think beyond the traditional stairs, like that can we work ramp systems in. I'm stretching here, but this idea of, we'll just throw in some stairs, I don't think that cuts it, actually. I think that actually makes it worse. So I would prefer that they actually stayed away from stairs, because I don't think that they support the goals that we're trying to do. I think they get in the way. So that's just a thought on that.
Yeah, point taken. That's something that we'll look at further. The intent of that policy is to in very strategic sites, make those connections. And some of the best practices we've seen out there have used ramps. And,
so I'd rather,
it is possible.
Yeah, and I'd rather go for the best practice. I don't want anyone saying, well, yeah, we'll just throw in some stairs and that will create their pedestrian connection. That's just is not good enough, because that's not a best practice. And so if we really are committed to the goals that we set out in our official community plan, which is to be accessible and all those great motherhood statements, then we have to see them in our policies and in our guidelines. And so stairs just aren't, they're just, it's old technology. We don't do that anymore. We put in ramps. So.
Yeah, we'll look at firming that up.
Great, thank you.
Councilor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. As someone who lives on the aptly named Steeple Drive, with the emphasis on the steep, and I want to know, I don't know exactly what our grade is at the bottom of Steeple Drive or going up Charter Hill Drive as well. Very steep roads. Are those in the 35% grade range or less? Are we talking about 35% only with step townhouses and apartments, or are we looking at single-family residences or duplexes at 35% grade?
Yeah, just through to Councillor O'Neill, just to clarify, these policies are generally applicable between 10% and 35%. So a lot of the development we're seeing up in Smiling Creek at this point with grading and retaining walls is 10 to 15%. Our zoning bylaw prohibits development above 35%.
Mm-hmm. Was that? And is there any prohibition on the steepness of driveways? If I ever sell my house, I'll sell it in the summer, not the winter, because I have a very steep driveway.
It's 15%.
Yeah, I don't think mine would pass that. I think there must have been a lax definition back then, or policy. Something I also wanted just to know if we have ever considered, or if this is part of our policy. Steepness of grade is generally it's a relevant issue wherever you are, but it becomes more relevant the higher up the slope you are, because the higher up the slope, the more likely you are to get sleet and snow and ice because of the higher elevation. So I'd say at the top of Burke Mountain, it's a bigger issue than at the bottom of Burke Mountain. Is that something you guys ever consider or look at or take into account? Because of the winter, the effect in the winter. I'm not sure if this is something that's entered your universe yet, but it's something, practically speaking, living on Steeple Drive for 31 years, that I know at the bottom of the hill sometimes it's quite a bit different than at 4 or 5 blocks up the hill. Same thing in Ranch Park.
Yes, that's a good question. We did not specifically address local meteorological conditions, but it is something that could be taken into consideration through the rezoning process.
Yeah. If I could, Mr. Chair, I know under the building code and building bylaw, as you gain in elevation, the structural requirements for the dwellings increases, like the roof snow loads and that sort of thing. I haven't seen it applied to roads. I think it's just generally taken into account when a site is proposed for development, they review what the layout is and what the road grades are. I reckon if it's up near Harper as opposed to down by Victoria, they'd probably scrutinize it much more closely higher up the hill.
Well, I think that's definitely something that should be taken into account, because it might, most people buy a home in the spring or the summer and they don't think of that, and then they move in and wow, there's a lot of snow and ice up here, and it creates a problem. I think it's just better service that we can provide the public.
All through?
Yep.
Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, as somebody who lives up on the mountain, I can certainly appreciate the challenges of building up there, and especially as we move around to the east side of the mountain, where the slopes are considerably steeper than where we have previously built. To me, in the executive summary, I think the key words are here: focus on the viability and the aesthetic quality of developing on a slope. And the one thing I really want to avoid is seeing terracing and seeing retaining walls. And I think that, and I've seen it even up on my part of the mountain, where even on areas with a gentle slope, there's still a tendency for some developers to want to put a 4-foot retaining wall so they can have a perfectly flat backyard. And I think that, everybody wants a view and everybody wants a flat backyard. And I think that this part of the mountain are going to have spectacular views. And I think that as we build there, I think we have to embrace the topography that we have. But that topography is going to present challenges, but it's also going to present opportunities. And I think we have an opportunity to do things differently there. And I think we should embrace that topography and make use of it to create a different type of housing than we've seen in other places of the mountain. We've seen a couple examples of other areas in the city where one development that was recently completed that's been built on a slope up in the plateau area, and it's wonderful what they have done there. And they've made use of the slope, and they've incorporated that into the development, and they've done it without walls and terracing and that sort of thing. And that's what really concerns me. And I'd be particularly concerned about any walls that face houses. And we've had some other areas in the city where on one side of the street it's a retaining wall and the other side it's the front yard. And so I think, and then we get into the issues, who maintains that wall, and aesthetically what is one resident looking at what is basically the back wall of the neighbor across the street. So I think we want to really watch how we're doing the terracing, and instead of doing that, build to embrace the slope, and that is going to present some challenges, but I think that goes along with that territory. So it's a good report. I think we've covered off a lot of things, and those are as we go into doing the development permits in that area, those are the things that I'm certainly going to be watching for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No other speakers. Can I have a motion to receive for information? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Next item.
Next item, item 6, pertains to proposed bear management policies, and the report is for information.
Okay, I've got a speaking order of Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I just have two comments. One, is this report going to go to the Environment and Sustainability Committee, Advisory Committee? Bears are environmental. We're talking about culverts. Come on, it's part of our environment. So I'd like to hear from them. Get their feedback.
Anybody want to take that one?
Sure, Mr. Chair. If committee wants to forward to the Sustainability and Environmental Advisory Committee for their comments, we'd be happy to take it there.
I think it's one of the reasons why we have them. So I'd like to hear from them on this. And the other one, the other comment I have has to do with the accommodating bear movements and the proposed sort of network. And is there any way we can get a bit of a diagram about what your, or first of all, just a photo of what one of those things looks like? And again, this is just the visual. And is there a map of where some of the concerns are? If you can show us on a map where some of these challenges might be, so that we have a sense of like how many of these underbridge things are we talking about, and what's just a bit of a context. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
All through?
Yep.
Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you. Very good report. Glad to see it here. I have a couple issues. I've brought these issues up before. We talk about the garbage cans going to, I like the idea of the newer secured, but I still always want to talk about in single family and all the multifamilies that a locked-in secured area for the garbage cans to be and be less of an attraction. And especially with our single family homes, for reducing size, lot sizes, putting it on the side of the house or the back of the house because your narrowness. You need to design it in with either the garage area or some area where it's away and reduces that attraction even more. If you're just going to have a garbage can outside that has locking, if people don't lock it properly and it's outside, you're still causing a problem with the attraction. And that's been an ongoing comment that I'd like to see put into all our regulations for the Northeast, Westwood Plateau, all across. When you take about River Heights and the Chines, where the bears are going through that area as we move through. Sending this to the Environment Committee, it can be done. I do know that we've gotten we have a expert on staff, a bear smart person that's his specialty. We also received input from who gave us our bear hazard assessment, again, to refine our search. So we have gotten expert advice in this field from our own staff person and somebody else. So we can send it to the Environment Committee. They're not all experts in this field, but we have received expert advice from them. The other question, Mr. McIntyre, I have to do is with fencing. And I've noticed that the increase in height of the fencing along areas. But my concern is we've had issues about ownership of fencing, who maintains, who replaces the fencing. We've had that up in Westwood Plateau. So we're putting in fencing along SPIA areas. And so in the future, is that the individual homeowner's responsibility to maintain and look after? Does the city enforce maintenance since it's on and protecting a SPIA area? So because the developer's going to put it in, and it's all going to be done and nice and everything like that. But 20 years from now, and it's falling apart, who's responsible and how do we manage to make sure that fencing stays and protects those wildlife, those sensitive areas, SPIA areas?
Mr. Chair, I can try to respond on that. If other staff want to clarify or maybe correct, I would invite them to comment as well. My understanding is with the areas through the RAR, Riparian Areas Regulation process, the SPIAs that are so determined and recommended by the developer's qualified environmental professional, those areas that are defined that way, the delineating fencing is actually set inside the SPIA. So it's not on private property. And this is an instance where it's a fairly durable metal chain link fence that's actually within the SPIA, not on the private property of the lots. So the other sites that are being talked about where fencing would be anticipated to try to contain or direct bear movements, such as, say, along a park or a public school site, the fencing there obviously would be on those properties themselves.
Well, I guess,
and they would be maintained by the school district and whoever's in.
When I read the report, it to me seemed like this is going to be on private property also and different areas. So, and I guess so if the fencing is all within the SPIA RAR area, all that fencing is the responsibility of the city to maintain and look after. That's why I'm just trying to get, because I've been told different things before when you talk about the fencing, that it's the homeowner's responsibility along the SPIA with the report and the development has happened. And I'm just, because we've had issues in Westwood Plateau in regards to fencing that was put up years ago, the replacement of that fencing, and that's not along SPIA areas, but this is along a SPIA area. So I would like to find a clear answer on that.
Again, through the chair, good question. Let's take that away. We'll just verify that this description I just gave you does apply. I know the instance you're referring to in the plateau, and we were challenged by that. That was a little bit different. It wasn't along a SPIA, as you noted.
And the other part in your thing is I would like to see this report and its actions to be used throughout the city in bear areas, so just not in the Partington Creek and northeast Coquitlam. It should be all throughout the area. And I think we've made great headway with our bearware coordinator, Drake Stevens, the education, the outreach. I think we're doing a great job, but we can do a lot more, and I think this report shows that we can refine our approach and do an even a better job. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I must say that my heart skipped a beat when I was reading the first couple of pages of the report until I got into the meat of it when I read that one of the goals was to accommodate bear movements. And I went, wait a minute. How sensitive to the bears are we now becoming? But I was very happy to see that it was more in terms of limiting their access and where they had to move, the culverts and the underpasses and things like that would be set aside and protected from the public. And so generally I think this is we're in a real good position here, and I like this report. I think it's got a lot of common sense into it and reflects, I think, the way people will want to handle the issue. I have a question regarding this, the fencing and the school board, and the A, extra costs for the school board for bigger fences, and B, their long-term responsibility to maintain. And this question comes from my position as chair of the school board city liaison committee. I want to make sure that this School District 43 knows about this early on and in discussion with this, and working closely with them to inform them about this and to get their feedback as well.
Yes, through to Councillor O'Neill, we will be consulting with the school district on this for sure as a part of the consultation process on the policies and the plan. Okay.
And maybe it can even be on the agenda of our next meeting if it needs to be discussed.
If I could, Mr. Chair, on that, having lived on the plateau for a number of years and taken my kids to several of the schools up there, often, and I think firstly to be a good neighbor, many of the schools have higher fences, certainly along the residential interface to keep balls and kids and stuff on the school grounds. Also, too, that the two elementary schools I'm thinking of, the interface along the SPIA typically has a higher fence there, so it may they may be just providing for that anyways, but we will verify that and report back.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
A good report. Again, what strikes out, a couple of things that jump out at me, and the key that I think summarizes this is finding a way to reduce the risk of potential human and bear conflicts. And I think that's the key, both for the safety of our citizens, but also for the safety of the bears. And I think we recognize that we're moving into their habitat, so looking for a way that we can coexist with the bears and in a way that we don't have the potential for conflict, because at the end of the day, the bears end up losing. And so I think that we have to look at ways that we can reduce that interaction. I think there's some really innovative approaches here. The one that the suggestion that I've really liked, and I agree with Councillor Asmundson on this one, is the idea of starting to build homes and multifamily dwellings up there with separate garbage compartments built into the side of the home. We saw some examples of this in North Vancouver when we did a tour recently, and I think the idea of on the side of the house having a couple of doors that open up and having your garbage containers still outside of the house but still inside, I think is a really innovative way to go. I have a cottage where I've done the same thing, and it works really well. I really like it because it keeps the odors and things out of the garage, and at the same time, your garbage cans aren't sitting at the side of the house attracting bears. And I think it's something that we really need to look at as we develop in not just, as Councillor Osmond said, not just on the northeast, but in other areas of the city where we have the potential for that human-bear conflict. I think that we have to look at ways we can minimize that contact. Thank you.
Councillor Reno.
Thank you. And I agree that that sort of thing is what we need to be looking at, the correct garbage receptacles and containers. We need to, and we've seen from Burke Mountain that is a huge issue, is that people don't have those proper containers. But the other issue as well is the fact that some people are not utilizing their disposal of kitchen waste properly. And so what's happening is they're putting their kitchen waste into the regular garbage, so that kitchen waste isn't being picked up early in the morning. Rather, it's sitting around for the later pickup in Burke Mountain. So that's another lesson that I think we need to learn for these bear management and solid waste management policies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't have no other speakers. Can we have a motion for information feedback? Been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Any other items, Mr. Clerk?
No, Mr. Chair, that's the last formal item on this agenda.
Regularly moved and seconded for adjournment. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.